Alright, welcome back. Part 2 of building the general ledger or working with the general ledger so that our reporting can come out looking nice and clean and we can get on with the business of analysis. So we left off with target adjustments. This is just going to show us adjustments that we've made, and it'll show that way in the reporting, otherwise it'll show blank, and you'll see that later. So next thing, requisition. Again, we lose some data sometimes and they get put into other tables in the DEAMS database. So what we've done is go grab a few other reports. In this particular case, reference 1. If reference 1 does say REQ, they give me reference 4 because that's the requisition number. However, if it does not, then what we want to do is reach back to this com to ob table, which we pulled in here, and do an index and match and go find that requisition number. So that's what that one's doing. It does its thinking. You don't see anything, but if we do the drop down, see our GPCs. Alright, we got some Form 9s in there, so that's what we wanted to show. Otherwise, show blank PO. Now this one, it's going to be the base of our reporting because everything's a PO. It becomes a PO. It pays off a purchase order. This one's a beast. I'm not going to lie at all. A lot of time was spent trying to figure out not only the proper reports to pull, but the logic to put into this formula right here to make this all work. If we expand this down, okay, this statement right here referencing both of these tables and in the proper order is what's going to give us, as best we know, it seems like a 99% solution. We say 99% because when we have straight pays or things like that where we can't link them back to a purchase order. So that's what this is doing. I'm not going to try and attempt to break this down for you. So we're going to push this in here, and you'll see it in the reporting how it ties together. So if you've been in DEAMS for a while, when you see how powerful this is, you're going to go, wow. If you've not been in DEAMS, you'll probably be like, that's a huge formula. I don't get it. But trust me, if you've been in DEAMS and you've been looking for purchase orders and working with DFAS, you see how it was like 5 seconds to calculate that. Remember, we sorted this column, or this data here, so that we could use some approximate matches and some of these lookups, so that'd be much, much more quick. So, I guess in some sense you'll just need to take our word for it. During the class, we'll go through it a lot more, and in the prelude videos to the GL, we do understand it's a little bit complicated, so we do some videos that speak specifically to the columns and reference columns that we use. In this one, we're just trying to show you what's in the Excel tool so that we can get the results that we want. And again, we drop this down, we see our 1081s, JVs, all these fuel transactions on down the line. Contracts, you're going to see how when we filter to a contract itself, when we build this pivot table, because of what we're doing, we're going to filter to a contract, and we're going to see the requisitions, multiple requisitions that funded that purchase order. So it's really powerful. DOV, that's something that's not naturally in the general ledger unless the invoice number is the same as the DOV. It's not always that way. So what we wanted to do, we already have the report. We have if you can see the invoice LOA report, that's the name of the table that I gave it. We reach back into that report and find those those DOVs to bring them into the pivot table as well. So adding power to the reporting that we're having, and automating it, integrating the data into what we're doing. So here you go, see all these DOV numbers that are not naturally in the general ledger, pulling them in there for you. Slicer PO, that's an extra column we added whenever we were building this, because in the reporting, if you have a slicer based on 35,000 records, well, you're just never going to use it. So what we're doing in this formula is essentially saying, hey, if this is an interfund bill, or it says FP, or it says FS, so interfund bills, FPs, supplies, fuel, those things just happen. They just are going to transact, and most of our bases, there's a whole lot of them. So what we want to do for the purchase orders, we want to see things like Form 9s, contracts and things like that. So we're simply making the slicer more effective that we're going to put into our reporting. Alright, so paste that in there. It's just going to give us blanks for anything that's not a specific purchase order that we look at approved documents for, etc. So that is it. That's what we put in the general ledger, and believe it or not, that's accumulation of a couple years worth of trial and error and work. So hopefully you find the reporting that's a result of this to be as effective as we do. So let's go ahead and move into, and you can please always reference that, com to ob, that's the names of our tables. Have an understanding, come back to these videos of how these work. We're going to move on though now to building that pivot, the second to last pivot of this video series, and then we're going to bring in the arrows work days, end with an easy one. But let's build this GL pivot and see the power that we get out of doing all this integration. So Alt-NV is the keyboard shortcut. I'm going to do a brand new tab. All right, we're working with an entire year of data here. This is an entire fiscal year in DEAMS, so it's not going to be lightning fast. It just won't be. But I think that you'll see that it's worth waiting a few seconds is all we're going to be doing. So here we go. I'm going to label this DEAMS GL. Consistency, label this green so I know my reporting versus my raw data. Alright, so I'm going to build this just like the template. So first thing we're going to do, that really huge formula we talked about earlier, PO, that's the first one we're going to use, that purchase order. So we're going to put that in there. And before that, let me back up real quick because there's some quick and easy ways to make life a little bit easier for you. This will be this in the template. So purchase orders, we want these requisitions actually, and you can do this to set this way so it'll organize these as you build out. So we want target load, requisition, purchase order, disbursement, and we want them always to be like that for any purchase order we have. You'll see why that makes so much sense, but just know that you can do that in building a pivot table. Just go ahead and set that sort order for yourself so you're not resorting all the time. So purchase order, I'm going to drag this right in front of reference 1. You can see it's already building out the way we don't want it to, so we're going to have to correct that, no problem. Template will come preset to at least how we like to view. Requisition, we're going to add that target load, the date. Let's go ahead and find our post date. Alright. DOV. Let's see all these fields that we're pulling in here. These are all things that were not naturally in the general ledger, and if they were, we still needed to clean them up a little bit so we can in the end get a decent looking report out of this. Fiscal year, again, we are pulling data. We're pulling data from a post date of 1 October moving forward. That's how we'll train it, because we want to see if expired years things transact in our current operating budget year or current fiscal year. So we do pull in the fiscal year so we can see that. Now remember that pivot table display only, PTEO display only right here. That's the one we're going to put in next, because we want to see that full blend. We want to be able to look at this and say, okay, that's our full blend along with our other data elements. So that's why we use that one. And the template sub-commodity will be in there. Again, it's the program inside of your program, so to speak. So that's all of those data elements. I'm going to go into my formatting routine. Row headers, turn them off. Report layout, tabular, turn off grand totals. Turn off subtotals. Again, even with a full year of data, it's pretty quick and how this flies around. So view grid lines, right click inside of your pivot table, options, display, turn them off. Data, I do not want it remembering old stuff. Hit OK. Analyze, select entire pivot table so that it remembers to format everything as it changes. Hit OK. Now Now, next thing is going to be our SOA, stage of accounting, and we saw this in the CRIS data just like this. So alright, check this out. C, D, you can see how they're in order like that. So I'm gonna, same thing, crosshairs here, click and drag it. See how that full green line all the way down, that's what you want to see with the bar at the top. Move this over to in front of O, move the E over to the right of O, whereas our U alphabetically is way over here. These quick adjustments, once you do adjust them, it will remember. D, we definitely want to move D over next to its other reimbursement friends. So now this is kind of hard on the eyes, so what if I did something like this? Okay, now I'm seeing where these are a little bit easier. Just to let you know, D, F, and R, don't forget reimbursements. Annual and quarterly reimbursement authority, let's move this over here. And I think I've got this in the order that I want it. Alright, so here we go. See if we can't wrap text and make that a little better. Oh, we left it just like that. So now we've got everything in the order that we want it. And just like before, it's time to add our amount. So we just come up to the amount column here. We've added these dollar values down here, and you can see that it's quite a bit, 35,000 records. So a lot going on here. I'm going to select one just like I did before so that I can highlight my values down to the end. Let's see if I can't just highlight these and see where it gets to, or if I picked a really bad one to highlight. Nah, it's not too bad. Control Shift money sign. Alright, and then unfilter that. Now I've got everything. Let me hide the field list. Go ahead and select all of these, double click, and zoom out just a little bit. So we've got this set up just like we had our other one. Now let's see if we can't highlight one thing in here that'll show you kind of the power of this. So let me see a purchase order that is a W. I'm going to unselect here and find a contract. Alright, look at that. So let me go ahead and subtotal the purchase order, because that's how it'll come in the template. So now, out of tens and thousands of records that execute over the course of a year, we're seeing the requisition, the purchase order, this is the actual contract, and then the disbursement, all linked together, all over time. We've got our DOV voucher numbers in there, the fiscal year, and then the full line of accounting, the sub-commodity affected. You can see here where there are some sub-commodities just because of how I selected them, but if there were multiple requisitions that funded this, you would also see that. And you can see that C, O, U, and E as it expenses and it's funded over time. You see all of that broken out just in this one report. And again, if you've been on DEAMS, this is powerful. And it's powerful if for no other reason than it's going to save you tons of time just to try to get to the point where you can do this. But also think about audit purposes. So let's look at a fuel purchase. Okay, we're doing a mill strip transaction, and I happen to pull up all of the fuel ones there. That's not what I wanted to do, but as you're seeing, you can filter like this. Let me pick one fuel transaction. Let's say you did a fire audit and they come asking for it. That's the fuel transactions right there. You're seeing the actual purchase order. It goes U to E. It transacts real quick like that. If there were multiple, the DOV voucher number. If you go into the general ledger and just filter by one thing like this, you're going to miss it. You're going to miss potentially half of the entire transaction when you send that in. So again, incredibly powerful. The next thing we do here, and it expands back out, is we add our slicers back in just like we did before. Now go back to the CRIS STH part where we added the slicers in. I'm going to put them in here behind the scenes just like we did in the CRIS STH video, basically the same time, because these videos get big and then the file sizes get huge. But reference some of the pivot table videos we do, please go back and reference the preludes to this how do we build the tool, which are the what is the general ledger, and giving you a little bit more detailed information so that you can learn to look at these right and coordinate with ALO and budget and DFAS and just make your life a lot easier. So the next video we're going to incorporate the arrows workday execution into this template, and then we will have our resource management report template ready to go, and that's what will be on the SharePoint. See you in the next video.